The chill wind whipping off the Thames seemed to mirror the icy dread gripping Prince Edward's heart. Buckingham Palace loomed before him, a Gothic monolith of power and tradition, but tonight it felt more like a gilded cage, holding secrets that threatened to shatter the very foundations of the monarchy. He wasn't scheduled to be here. A late-night call, cryptic and laced with urgency from Lady Amelia Pembroke, the palace's unflappable chief of protocol, had pulled him from a quiet evening at his country estate. Amelia, a woman who made granite seem pliable, didn't do urgent unless the sky was, quite literally, falling. "There's something you need to see, Your Highness," she'd said, her voice tight. "Something concerning the Legacy Exhibition." The Legacy Exhibition, a carefully orchestrated display of royal history, meant to project an image of unity and strength. It was supposed to be a triumph, a reaffirmation of the Windsor dynasty's enduring reign. Now, Edward suspected, it was ground zero for something far more sinister. He found Amelia waiting for him in her office, a small book-lined sanctuary tucked away from the palace's opulent corridors. The air hung thick with the scent of old paper and unspoken anxieties. She gestured towards a bank of monitors, their screens flickering with grainy surveillance footage. "Take a look at this, sir," she instructed, her tone clipped and professional, betraying none of the turmoil Edward sensed beneath the surface. The footage was unremarkable at first glance. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, Prince Andrew's ex-wife, navigating the crowded exhibition hall. Sarah, or Fergie as she was once affectionately known, had been banished from the royal fold years ago, a casualty of scandal and poor judgment. Her presence tonight, uninvited and unannounced, was already a breach of protocol, a jarring note in the carefully composed symphony of the exhibition. But it was what happened next that set Edward's senses on high alert. The footage showed Sarah engaging in a furtive exchange with Sir Lionel Ashcroft, a former financial advisor to the royals. Lionel had been stripped of his titles and influence 2 years prior, after Prince William exposed his shady financial dealing. The man nursed a bitter grudge against the crown, a simmering resentment that made him a dangerous enemy. The meeting was brief, almost imperceptible. A quick glance, a whispered word, and the passing of a small object, possibly a USB drive. It was the kind of interaction that could easily be dismissed as inconsequential, but Edward's instincts, honed by years of navigating the treacherous currents of royal life, told him otherwise. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a carefully orchestrated rendezvous, a clandestine exchange between two individuals with a shared motive: revenge. "What do you make of it, Amelia?" Edward asked, his voice low. Amelia sighed, her usually impassive face etched with concern. "I don't like it, sir. Not one bit. Sarah's presence alone is unsettling, but her meeting with Ashcroft, it suggests a coordinated effort to disrupt the exhibition." Edward nodded, his mind racing. What were Sarah and Lionel planning? What was the significance of the USB drive? And, most importantly, how could he protect the royal family from whatever scheme they were about to unleash? He knew he couldn't afford to underestimate them. Sarah, despite her past missteps, was cunning and resourceful, and Lionel, with his intimate knowledge of the palace's inner workings, was a formidable opponent. They were two wounded animals, cornered and desperate, and that made them all the more dangerous. Edward felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This wasn't just a minor security breach. It was a declaration of war, a direct assault on the House of Windsor. And he, the quiet, unassuming Prince Edward, was the only one who stood between the monarchy and its potential downfall. The weight of the crown, though he didn't wear it, settled heavily on Edward's shoulders. He was the family's quiet fixer, the one who operated in the shadows, averting crises before they became public spectacles. Now, with Sarah and Lionel seemingly poised to detonate a bomb at the heart of the monarchy, his skills were needed more than ever. "We need to know what's on that drive," he stated, his gaze fixed on Amelia. "And we need to know what they intend to do with it." Amelia, ever the pragmatist, already had a plan in motion. "I've alerted our IT team, sir. They're attempting to access the drive's contents now. It's encrypted, but they're confident they can crack it." While they waited for the IT team to work their magic, Edward and Amelia delved deeper into Sarah and Lionel's backgrounds, searching for clues that might reveal the full scope of their plot. They reviewed Sarah's financial records, scrutinized Lionel's communications, and interviewed palace staff who had interacted with them in recent weeks. The picture that emerged was one of simmering resentment and calculated planning. Sarah, humiliated by her past scandals and ostracized from the royal family, had become consumed by a desire for revenge. And Lionel, stripped of his power and prestige, saw an opportunity to settle old scores and inflict maximum damage on the institution that had rejected him. Hours ticked by, each one adding to the growing tension. Finally, a message arrived from the IT team. They had cracked the encryption. The contents of the USB drive were displayed on a large monitor, revealing a meticulously crafted piece of digital deception. It was a video, seemingly innocuous at first glance, but upon closer inspection, a sinister manipulation became clear. The video contained spliced footage of King Charles and Prince William, edited to create the illusion of a bitter feud between father and son. Statements were taken out of context, facial expressions were subtly altered, and the overall narrative was twisted to portray a monarchy on the verge of collapse. They're trying to create a crisis of confidence, Edward realized, his voice grim, to undermine public trust in the succession and destabilize the entire institution. But the video was just one piece of the puzzle. As Edward and Amelia continued to investigate, they uncovered further evidence of Sarah and Lionel's plot. They learned of a plan to sabotage the Legacy exhibition's audiovisual equipment, creating a chaotic and embarrassing spectacle during King Charles's speech. And they discovered a scheme to damage a priceless historical artifact, further tarnishing the monarchy's image. "They're attacking us on multiple fronts," Amelia observed, her voice tight with anger. "They're trying to create a perfect storm of scandal and chaos." Edward knew that he had to act quickly to neutralize the threat. He couldn't allow Sarah and Lionel to succeed in their mission of destruction. The fate of the monarchy and perhaps the future of the country rested on his shoulders. He turned to Amelia, his eyes filled with determination. "It's time to play our hand," he declared. "We're going to expose them, and we're going to do it in a way that leaves no doubt about their guilt." The pieces began to move with the precision of a Swiss watch. Amelia, with her deep understanding of palace protocol and her network of loyal staff, orchestrated a counter-offensive. The technician, seemingly in Sarah's pocket, was subtly turned, his loyalty bought with the promise of a secure future far from Lionel's clutches. The red wine, destined to stain a priceless document, was switched for a harmless replica. The stage was set for a final confrontation, a silent battle waged in the heart of Buckingham Palace. As the Legacy exhibition reached its climax, Edward felt a surge of adrenaline. He watched Sarah, her face a mask of anticipation. As the moment of truth approached, he saw Lionel lurking in the shadows of the technical control room, his eyes gleaming with malice. They believed they were about to deliver a fatal blow to the monarchy. They were wrong. The signal check video began to play, and the carefully constructed facade of Sarah and Lionel's plot crumbled before their eyes. The tampered timeline, the parking lot exchange, the financial transactions, all were laid bare for the world to see. The silence in the hall was deafening, broken only by Sarah's desperate cries of denial. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. In the aftermath, as Sarah and Lionel were led away in disgrace, Edward felt a profound sense of relief. He had averted a crisis, protected the monarchy, and upheld the honor of his family. But he also felt a deep sadness. Sarah, once a vibrant and beloved member of the royal family, had been consumed by bitterness and revenge. And Lionel, a man of great talent and potential, had allowed his ambition to corrupt him. As for Sarah Ferguson, she is more blameworthy. While her initial hurt and humiliation are understandable, her descent into plotting and conspiracy, fueled by a thirst for revenge, is ultimately her own doing. She had opportunities to rebuild her life, to find peace and purpose outside the royal family. Instead, she chose to embrace darkness and seek to destroy the institution that had once embraced her. If I were Edward, I would uphold the verdict of permanent exile for Sarah. Her actions were not merely a personal betrayal. They were an attack on the very foundation of the monarchy, an institution that represents stability and unity for the nation. To show leniency would be to send a message that such behavior is acceptable, which it is not. However, I would also ensure that Sarah receives the psychological help she clearly needs. Her descent into darkness suggests a deep-seated emotional turmoil that needs to be addressed. While she must face the consequences of her actions, she also deserves a chance to find healing and redemption. The drawing room, usually a haven of quiet elegance, felt suffocating. The scent of beeswax and old money couldn't mask the stench of betrayal that lingered in the air. William, his face a thundercloud, paced back and forth, muttering about the audacity, the sheer gall of it all. Charles sat slumped in a high-backed chair, the weight of the crown seemingly amplified tenfold. He looked every one of his years, the lines around his eyes deepened by disappointment and a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I simply don't understand it," Charles finally said, his voice raspy. "After all the family has done for her, after all the chances we gave her." Edward remained silent, watching the play of emotions on his brother's face. He knew Charles felt a personal sting from Sarah's actions, a sense of having been personally betrayed. He also knew that Charles, despite his outward show of strength, was deeply affected by the constant scrutiny and the relentless attacks on the monarchy. "It's not about understanding, Charles," Edward finally said, his voice calm but firm. "It's about protecting. We can't afford to let sentiment cloud our judgment. Sarah made her choice and she must face the consequences." William stopped pacing and fixed Edward with a sharp look. "And what of Lionel? Stripping him of his titles is hardly enough. He should be prosecuted, held accountable for his crimes." Edward nodded in agreement. "I've already alerted the proper authorities. They'll handle the investigation and ensure that he faces the full force of the law." The conversation turned to Lady Amelia and Theo. Both were deserving of recognition, but Edward knew that public displays of gratitude could be misconstrued, used by the ever-present media to further sensationalize the story. He suggested quiet honors, private acknowledgments of their loyalty and service, a knighthood for Amelia, perhaps, and a significant bonus and promotion for Theo. As the meeting drew to a close, Charles turned to Edward, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "You handled this with remarkable skill, Edward. You saved us from a potentially devastating crisis." Edward simply nodded, deflecting the praise. "I did what was necessary, Charles. It was my duty." He left Buckingham Palace feeling drained but resolute. The monarchy was safe, for now, but he knew that the threats would continue to come, that there would always be those who sought to undermine the institution. It was a constant battle, a never-ending game of chess. Back at his private residence, Edward poured himself a glass of scotch and sat alone in his library, surrounded by the familiar comfort of his book. He thought about Sarah, about the choices she had made, the path she had chosen. He couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for the woman she had once been, the vibrant, vivacious Fergie who had brought so much joy to the royal family. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone consumed by bitterness and revenge. He also thought about Lionel, about the corrosive power of ambition and resentment. He had seen it time and time again, the way that power could corrupt, how easily people could be led astray by their own desires. Edward took a long sip of his scotch and stared into the flickering flames of the fireplace. He knew that his role was to protect the monarchy, to defend it against all threats, both internal and external. It was a heavy burden, but one that he was willing to bear. He was the silent guardian, the protector of the crown, and he would continue to serve, quietly and diligently, until his last breath. The game, after all, was far from over.